Hello from the underground. Hurrah for the underground. Continuing with and concluding Balzac's Old Goriot. Poor Nassie, said Delphine, alarmed at the wild, almost crazy expression grief had drawn on her father's face. I was in the wrong. Kiss me. Ah, that is a balm to my heart, cried Goriot. But where are we to find 12,000 francs? Suppose I offered myself as a substitute in the army. Oh, father, they both cried, putting their arms round him. No, no. God will reward you for that thought. Our lives would not be enough to repay it, would they, Nassie? And besides, father dear, it would only be a drop in the ocean, the Countess pointed out. But is there nothing a man can earn with his flesh and blood, then? Cried the old man in despair. If anyone can save you, Nassie, I am his, body and soul. I will do murder for him. I will do what Vautrin did and go to prison for it. He stopped abruptly, looking as if a thunderbolt had struck him. Nothing left, he said, tearing his hair. If I only knew where to go to steal the money, but it's so hard to find a place to rob, and it would take time to rob the bank, and I should need people to help me. Then I must die. There's nothing left for me to do but die. Yes, that's it. That's all I'm good for. It's not worth calling me a father now. No, she asks for my help in her need, and I, miserable wretch that I am, have nothing to give her. You bought yourself a life annuity, you old scoundrel. Although you had daughters, do you not love your daughters, that you could do such a thing? Die miserably, like the dog you are. Yes, I am lower than a dog. A dog would not have behaved like that. Oh, my head, it is bursting. Papa, the two young women cried, clinging to him to prevent him from dashing his head against the wall. You must be reasonable. He broke into sobs. Eugene, horror-stricken, took the bill Vautrin had signed, the stamp on which was sufficient for a larger sum. He changed the figures and made it into a proper bill for 12,000 francs, payable to Goriot's order. Then he went into the room next door. Here's the whole amount, madam, he said, handing her the piece of paper. I was sleeping, your conversation wakened me, and so I was able to learn what I owed Monsieur Goriot. This bill clears my debt, and you can convert it into cash. I will pay it off punctually, on the proper date. The Countess stood stock still for a moment, holding the document in her fingers. Then, pale and trembling with mounting anger, rage, fury, she said, Delphine, I forgive you everything, as God is my witness, but who could forgive this? This gentleman was here all the time, and you knew it. You were petty enough to take your revenge, and let me betray my secrets, my life, the lives of my children, my shame, my honor. There, you are nothing to me anymore. I hate you. I will do all the harm I can. She was too angry to go on. Her throat dried up with rage. But he's my son, our dear child, your brother, your savior, exclaimed Goriot. Kiss him, Nasie. Look, I am kissing him. And he strained Eugene to him in a frenzied clasp. Oh, my child, I will be more than a father to you. I will give you the love of a whole family. I wish I were God so that I could throw the universe at your feet. Why don't you kiss him, Nasi? He's not a man, but an angel from heaven. Let her be, father. She's mad at the moment, said Delphine. Mad, mad! And what are you? Cried Madame de Restaud. Children, I shall die if you go on like this, cried the old man, and he fell on his bed as if a bullet had struck him. They are killing me, he murmured to himself. The Countess looked at Eugene, who was standing as if paralyzed, stunned by the violence of the scene. Sir, she said to him, suspicion and inquiry in her gesture, voice, and eyes, paying no attention to her father or to Delphine, who was hastily unfastening his waistcoat. Madam, I will meet the bill and hold my tongue about it, he replied to her unspoken question. You have killed our father, Nasi, said Delphine, pointing to the old man laying, apparently unconscious, on the bed. Her sister fled. I forgive her with all my heart, he said, opening his eyes. Her situation is frightful and would turn a better head. Comfort Nasi and be gentle with her, Delphine. Promise this to your poor father who is dying, he begged Delphine, holding her hand tightly. Oh, what's the matter? She said in great alarm. Nothing, her father replied. It will pass off. There's something pressing on my forehead. It's just a headache. Poor Nasi, what a prospect lies before her. As he was speaking, the Countess returned and threw herself at her father's feet. Forgive me, she cried. Come, said Goriot, you are hurting me much more now. The Countess turned to Rastignac, her eyes swimming with tears. Sir, she said, my misery made me unjust to you. You will be a brother to me, won't you? And she held out her hand to him. Nasi, said Delphine, putting her arms around her sister. Little Nasi, let us forgive and forget everything. No, cried Nasi, I shall remember. Dear angels, cried Goriot, you are tearing away the dark curtain that hung heavy on my eyes. Your voices bring me back to life. Kiss one another again. Well, Nasi, this bill will save you, won't it? I hope so. See here, Papa. Will you write your name on it? Goodness, how stupid of me to have forgotten that. But I did not feel well, Nasi, so don't bear me ill well. Send me a message to let me know as soon as your troubles are over. No, I will come myself. No, better not. I cannot risk meeting that husband again. I should kill him on the spot. As for the transfer of your property, I should have something to say about that. Run along, child, and see that Maxime behaves himself. Eugene was too dumbfounded to say anything. Poor Anastasie has always had a rather violent temper, said Madame de Nucingen, but she has a good heart. She came back for the endorsement, Eugene said in a low voice to Delphine. Do you think so? I wish I weren't obliged to think so. Don't trust her, he replied, raising his eyes as if to confide to heaven thoughts he dared not put into words. Yes, she has always been a bit of a hypocrite, and my poor father lets himself be taken in by her airs. How do you feel now, dear Father Goriot? Eugene asked the old man. I feel inclined to have a sleep, he answered. Eugene helped him to bed, and he fell asleep, holding his daughter's hand in his. Then Delphine prepared to go. This evening at the Italiens, she said to Eugene. And you can tell me how he is. You leave his house tomorrow, sir. Let's look at your room. Oh, how dreadful, she exclaimed as she went in. You are even worse off than father. Eugene, you have behaved very well. I would love you more than ever if it were possible, but, my dear boy, if you want to make your fortune, you mustn't throw 12,000 francs out of the window like that. The Comte de Trelles is a gambler. My sister shuts her eyes to that. He would have gone and found his 12,000 francs where he had lost and won piles of money before. A groan from the next door brought them back to Goriot, whom they found apparently sleeping, but as the two lovers reached his besides, they caught the words, "They are not happy." Whether he was sleeping or awake, the tone in which these words were spoken struck so keenly home to his daughter's heart that she leant over the pallet on which her father lay and kissed his forehead. He opened his eyes and said, "Oh, it's Delphine." "Well, how are you?" she asked. "Quite well," he said. "Don't worry, I shall go out presently. Don't stay, children. Go and be happy." Eugene accompanied Delphine to her door. Excuse me. Eugene accompanied Delphine to her door, but he was too uneasy at the state in which he had left Goriot to dine with her as she suggested, and returned to the Maison Vauquer. He found Goriot downstairs, and just about to sit down at the table. 𝐵𝐿𝐺𝐿 had placed himself where he could examine the vermicelli maker's face in a good light, and when he saw the old man pick up his bread and smell it to judge the quality of the flour, and noted that he seemed completely unconscious of what he was doing, the medical student shook his head ominously. "Come and sit near me, young medico," said Eugene. Biancan went the more readily because the change of place brought him nearer the old boarder. "What's the matter with him?" Rastignac asked. "If I'm not mistaken, he's done for. Some grave abnormality must have affected his system. He looks to me as if he were about to be stricken with a serious apoplexy. The lower part of his face is calm enough, but the upper part is drawn and distorted. The skin looks as if it was pulled involuntarily upwards towards the forehead. Do you see? Then the eyes show a peculiar condition that indicates the effusion of serum in the brain. Look, you might think that they were full of fine dust, mightn't you? I shall know more about his state tomorrow morning." "Is there any cure for that?" "No, none. It might be possible to prolong his life for a time if we could find a way of setting up a reaction towards the extremities, toward the legs. But if the symptoms have not passed off by tomorrow evening, it's all up with the poor old fellow. Do you know what happened to bring the illness on? He might have received a violent shock, and his mind has given way under it." "Yes, you are quite right," said Rastignac, remembering how the two daughters had struck blow after blow without remission or respite at their father's heart. "But," he said to himself, "at least Delphine loves her father." That evening, at the Italiens, Rastignac took some care not to alarm Madame de Nucingen unduly, but he had barely begun to speak when she interrupted him. "Don't worry about father," she said. "He's very strong. He was a little shaken by what we told him this morning, that's all. Our whole fortune hangs in the balance, so you see how serious the matter is. I could not go on living if your affection did not make me insensible to calamities I should once have thought unendurable. Now, only one anxiety can affect me, for only one misfortune that means anything can befall me, to lose the love that has made me feel the joy of being alive. I am indifferent to everything but your love. I no longer care for anything else in the world. You are the whole world to me. If I feel glad to be rich, it is so that I can give you more pleasure. I am, I confess it to my shame, a better lover than a daughter. Why? I do not know. My whole life is bound up in you. My father gave me a heart, but you have made it beat. What does it matter to me if the entire world blames me, if you exonerate me? And you have no right to think ill of me for sins I am driven to by an overwhelming love. Do you think me an unnatural daughter? Oh, no. It is impossible not to love a father so good as ours is. Could I prevent his seeing in the end the natural consequences of our deplorable marriages? Why did he permit them? Was it not his duty to think for us? Now, I know, he suffers as much as we do. But what can we do about it? Console him? Nothing we might say could console him. Our resignation hurt him and made him grieve much more than any reproaches or complaints we might have made. They are situations in life where all is bitterness. Eugene said nothing. This artless outpouring of sincere feeling filled his heart with tenderness. Parisian women are often false, intoxicated with vanity, selfish, flirtatious, cold. Yet it is certain that when they truly love, they are more ready than other women are to sacrifice all personal feelings to the passion. They rise above all their pettiness, and by this victory become sublime. Eugene was struck, too, by the keen and profound insight into natural feelings a woman shows when a privileged affection sets her, as it were, a little way off, and enables her to consider them with detachment. But Madame de Nucingen was not pleased at Eugene's silence. "What are you thinking of?" she asked. "I'm still thinking about what you said just now. Until this moment, I was sure that I loved you more than you loved me." She smiled, and hardened herself to resist the pleasures she felt, so that their conversation might not go beyond the safe limits fixed by propriety. She had never before heard a young love expressed itself in all sincerity. A few more words, and she could not have guarded her self-control. "Eugene," she said, changing the conversation, "you don't know what's been happening, do you? All Paris is to be at Madame de Bassant's tomorrow. The Roquefides and the Marquise de 𝐎𝐥𝐿 have agreed to keep the whole thing dark, but the king is signing their marriage contract tomorrow, and your poor cousin knows nothing about it yet. She can't possibly cancel her reception and ball, and the Marquis will not be there. People are talking of nothing else but this affair. And the world thinks a wicked sin funny, and winks at it. Don't you know that this will kill Madame de Bassant?" "No," said Delphine, smiling. "You don't know what stuff women of her kind are made of. But all Paris is going, and I shall be there. Of course I owe my good fortune to you." "But you are quite sure," said Rastignac, "that it's not just one of the silly rumors that are always flying about Paris? We shall know the truth tomorrow." Eugene did not go back to the Maison Vauquer. He could not bring himself to forego the pleasures of occupying his new rooms. The evening before, he had been obliged to leave Delphine at 1 a.m, but that night it was Delphine who left him to return home at 2 o'clock. He rose rather late the next day, and waited for Madame de Nucingen, who came to breakfast with him at about noon. In the greed with which, like all young men, he had snatched at these little enchanted hours of happiness, he had almost forgotten Old Goriot's existence. Getting used to all the elegant things that belonged to him was one long festival in itself, and then Madame de Nucingen was there, adding fresh luster to everything by her presence. However, about 4 o'clock, the lovers called Goriot to mind, and bethought themselves of the happiness with which he was looking forward to enjoying a new life in that house. Eugene pointed out that the old man ought to be moved there at once if he was going to be ill, and left Delphine to hurry back to the Maison Vauquer. Neither Old Goriot nor Biancan were at the table with the others. "Ha!" said the painter as Eugene came in. "Old Goriot has cracked up. Biancan is up there with him. The old chap saw one of his daughters, the Comtesse de Restaurama. There he insisted on going out, and made himself worse. Society is about to lose one of its brightest ornaments. Eugene leapt to the staircase. Hi, Monsieur Eugene. Monsieur Eugene, Madame is calling you, shouted Sylvie. Monsieur Eugene, said the widow, you and Monsieur Goriot should have left on the 15th of February. That was 3 days ago. It's the 18th now. I ought by rights to have a month's money down for both of you, but if you'll answer for Old Goriot, I'll take your word for it. Why, can't you trust him? Trust him? If the old fellow went off his head and died, his daughters wouldn't give him a farthing, and all his old things aren't worth 10 francs. He took all that was left of his table silver away this morning. I don't know why. He was got up to pass for a young man. Lord forgive me. I believe he had a rouge on. He looked quite young again. I'll be responsible for everything, Eugene said with a shudder of horror, feeling a dreadful premonition. He went upstairs to Goriot's room. The old man was lying in bed, and Balzac was with him. Good evening, father, said Eugene. The old man smiled sweetly at him and asked, turning glassy eyes towards him, How is she? She is quite well. What about you? I'm not too bad. Don't tire him, said Balzac, drawing Eugene aside into a corner in the room. Excuse me. Well, asked Eugene. Only a miracle can save him now. Serious congestion has set in. He has mustard, plasters on, and fortunately he can feel them. They are working. Can he be moved? That's out of the question. He must stay here and be kept quiet and spared anything that might upset him. Dear Balzac, said Eugene, we will look after him between us. I sent for the senior physician at my hospital, and he's been in to see him. Well, he won't give his verdict till tomorrow evening. He promised me he would come to have a look at him after the day's work was over. Unfortunately, the contrary old creature did something silly this morning, and he's not willing to enlighten us about it. He's as stubborn as a mule. When I speak to him, he pretends not to hear, and goes to sleep to get out of answering, or if his eyes are open, he begins to groan. He went out sometime this morning. He's been walking the streets, no one knows where in Paris, and he took everything he possessed of any value away with him. He's been out making some infernal bargain or other, and overtaxed his strength for the sake of it. One of his daughters has been here. The Countess? Asked Eugene. A tall brunette with bright, well-shaped eyes, a pretty foot and slender figure. Yes. Leave me alone with him for a while, said Rastignac. I'll be his confessor. He won't keep anything from me. Well, I'll go and have dinner meantime, but try not to excite him too much. There's still some hope. Don't worry. They'll have a good time tomorrow, Goriot said, when he was left alone with Eugene. They are going to a grand ball. What did you do this morning, Papa, to make you feel so poorly this evening that you have to stay in bed? Nothing. Did Anastasie come? Yes, said Old Goriot. Now, don't hide anything from me. What else did she ask you for? Oh, she was very unhappy, he replied, gathering all his strength to speak. You see, my boy, Nelsie hasn't had a penny to spend since the affair of the diamonds. She has ordered a gold laine dress for the ball, which should set off her beauty like a jewel. Her dressmaker, a wretch of a woman, would not give her credit, and her maid paid 1,000 francs on account for the dress. Poor Nelsie, to have come down to such shifts. It made my heart bleed to think of it. But when the maid saw that Rastad was on such bad terms with Nasi, she was afraid of losing her money, and she came to an agreement with the dressmaker, and now the dressmaker refuses to deliver the dress until the 1,000 francs are repaid. The ball is tomorrow. The dress is ready. What was Nasi to do? She wanted to borrow my forks and spoons to pawn them. Her husband is determined she shall go to this ball, and flaunts the diamonds they say she sold in the face of the whole of Paris. Could she go to the monster and say, "I owe 1,000 francs. Pay the bill for me"? Of course she couldn't. I saw that at once. Her sister Delphine will be there in a magnificent dress. Anastasie could not be outshone by her younger sister. And then, poor girl, she was so drowned in tears. I was so humiliated in not being able to produce 12,000 francs yesterday that I would have given the rest of my miserable life to make up the wrong I did her. You see, once I had broken the strength to bear everything. Once I had strength to bear everything, but lately, lack of money has broken my heart. Oh, I didn't hum and haw about it, I assure you. I spruced myself up a bit and made myself look as good as new. And then I went out and sold my spoons and forks and buckles for 600 francs, and I made over my claim to a year's payment of my annuity to Papa 𝐎𝐥𝐵 for 400 francs down. Ha! I can live on bread. It was good enough for me when I was a young man, so it should be good enough for me now. At any rate, my Nasi will have one happy evening. She will be smart. I have the 1,000 franc note here under my pillow. It warms me to have it lying under my head, since it's going to bring pleasure to my poor Nasi. She'll be able to send that bad girl Victorine packing. Did you ever hear of such a thing as servants not trusting their master? Tomorrow I shall be quite well. Nasi is coming at 10 o'clock. I don't want them to think I am ill, for they wouldn't go to the ball. They would stay and take care of me. Nasi will come and pet me tomorrow as if I were a child of hers. Her tenderness will cure me. And after all, I might have spent 1,000 francs on a physic, mightn't I? I would far rather give it to my Nasi. She's the doctor who cures all my ills. I can at least be of some comfort to her in her misery. That makes up for the wrong I did in getting an annuity for myself. She has fallen into an abyss, and I'm not strong enough to pull her out of it now. Oh, but I shall go into business again. I shall go to the Odessa and buy grain. Wheat is sold there at a third of the price we pay for ours. There's a law against importing grain in its natural state, but the honest fellows who make the laws didn't think of prohibiting wheat products. I thought of that myself this morning. There's a good business to be done in starch. He's delirious, Eugene said to himself as he watched the old man. Come, you mustn't talk. You must rest. Eugene went down for dinner when Bianca came upstairs again. During the night, they looked after the sick man in turns. One student spending time reading his medical books, the other writing home to his mother and sisters. Next morning the patient's symptoms were more hopeful, in Bianca's opinion, but his condition demanded continual attention which only the two students could give. It would be an outrage upon the mealy-mouthed phraseology of these times to describe their work in detail. Leeches were applied to the poor, emaciated body, and poultices, foot baths, and other medical treatments required the strength and devotion of the two young men. Madame de Restaud did not come. She sent a messenger for the money. I thought she would have come herself, but it's just as well she didn't. She would have been worried about me, her father said, and he appeared to be content. At 7 in the evening, Therese came, bringing a letter from Delphine. What can you be doing, dear? Are you neglecting me already when you have only just started to love me? When we poured out our hearts to one another, you showed me a soul too noble not to be true to love forever, knowing love's infinite variety and range. As you said once, when we were listening to the prayer in Moshe, For some, it is the monotony of a single note. For others, the infinite in music. Remember, I am expecting you this evening to take me to Madame de Basson's ball. It's quite true that the king signed Monsieur de Judo's marriage contract this morning, and the poor Viscountess knew nothing about it till 2 o'clock. The whole of Paris is going to throng to her house, just as people crowd to the Place de Grève when there's going to be an execution. Isn't it horrible to go only to see if she can put on a bold face on her miserably and die courageously? I should certainly not go, dear, if I had been there before. But of course she won't receive society anymore, and if I don't go now, all the efforts I have made will be thrown away. My position is quite different from other people's. Besides, I'm going partly for your sake. I'm waiting for you. If you are not with me within 2 hours, I don't know if I could forgive such treason. Rastignac took up a pen and wrote, I am waiting for a doctor. Until he comes, I shall not know if there is any hope of saving your father. He is desperately ill. I will bring you the doctor's verdict, and I am very much afraid it may be a sentence of death. You will see then if you can go to the ball. 1,000 loving thoughts. The doctor came at 8:30. And although his opinion on the case was not hopeful, he did not think that death was imminent. His prognosis was that there would be a series of alternative improvements in the good old man's condition and relapses, and his life and reason would depend on their degree. It would be better for him if he died quickly, was the doctor's final pronouncement. Eugene left old Goriot to Biancan's care, and went to convey the sad news to Madame de Nucingen, such news as could not fail to plunge a heart still deeply sensible of family ties in mourning. Tell her she's to enjoy herself all the same, Goriot called to him. He had been appearing to be dozing, but started up as Rastignac was going out. The young man presented himself to Delphine in grief and distress, and found her with her hair dressed up and her dancing shoes on, ready except for her ball dress. Yet the finishing touches of her toilet, like the strokes of which an artist completes his picture, requires more time than the whole groundwork of the creation. "Why, you're not dressed!" she exclaimed. "No, madam, your father—" "My father again!" she interrupted him sharply. "You don't need to teach me what is due to my father. I have known my father a long time. Not a word, Eugene. I'll only listen to what you have to say when you are dressed. Therese has got everything ready for you in your rooms. My carriage is waiting. Take it and come back again for me." "We will talk about father on the way to the ball. We must leave in good time, for if we were held up in the line of carriages, we shall be very lucky if we get there by 11 o'clock. "But, madame—" "Off with you. Not another word," she said, darting into her boudoir for a necklace. "No, do go, Monsieur Eugene. You will vex madame," urged Therese, trying to hurry the young man, who stood appalled by the callousness of this elegant parricide. He went to dress, with a mind full of the saddest, most disheartening reflections. He saw the world as an ocean of mud into which a man plunged up to the neck if he dipped a foot in it. Worldly crimes are mean and ignoble, he said to himself. Vautrin was greater than this. He had seen society in its three great aspects: obedience, struggle, and revolt. Or, in other words, the family, the world, and Vautrin. And the necessity of choosing one of them dismayed him. Obedience was boring, revolt impossible, and struggle hazardous. His thoughts carried him back to his home and his family. He remembered the pure happiness of his uneventful life there. He recalled the days spent among beings who loved him dearly, those dear creatures those dear creatures conformed to the natural laws of the domestic earth, and in so doing found a full and constant happiness there, unmarred by such torments as his. Yet, for all the fine thoughts, he did not feel he had the courage to go to Delphine and proclaim the creed of pure hearts, enjoying filial piety on her in the name of love. His education, though barely begun, had borne fruit already. He already loved selfishly. His powers of perception were keen enough for him to recognize the nature of Delphine's heart. He felt instinctively that she was capable of stepping over her father's dead body to go to the ball, and he had not the authority to play the part of mentor, nor the courage to cross her, nor the strength of mind to leave her. She would forgive me for putting her in the wrong over this. She would never forgive me for putting me in the wrong over this, he said to himself. Then he glossed the doctor's pronouncement. He gladly persuaded himself that old Goriot was not so dangerously ill as he had thought. He went on to gather traitorous arguments to justify Delphine. He did not know how serious her father's condition was. The kind old man would send her to the ball himself if she went to see him. The inflexible social law, true to a formula, so often condemns where an apparent crime can be excused by those who know what palliation of it may be found in differences of temperament within the family circle, diversity of interests, changing circumstances, all the innumerable complications of family life. Eugene sought to delude himself. He was ready to sacrifice his conscience to his mistress. Within the last 2 days, the whole orientation of his life had changed. A woman's disturbing influence had brought confusion into his world. He had eclipsed his family and made his entire being subservient to her ends. The circumstances in which Rastignac and Delphine had come together seemed expressly designed to afford them the keenest pleasures in each other. Their long-repressed passions had been inflamed by what is often passion's death blow, enjoyment. When he possessed this woman, Eugene knew that until the moment he had only desired her, he loved her only on the morrow of his happiness. Love is perhaps no more than gratitude for pleasure. It did not matter whether this woman was abominable or sublime. He adored her for the delight she had brought him as a dowry, and for the delights she took in him, and Delphine loved Rastignac as Tantalus would have loved an angel who had come to satisfy his hunger, or quench the thirst of his dry, parched throat. "Well, how is father?" said Madame de Nucingen, when Eugene returned, dressed for the ball. "He's very ill indeed," he replied. "If you want to give me proof that you do really care for me, you'll hurry back with me to see him." "Yes, of course," she said. "But after the ball, dear Eugene, be nice. Don't read me a sermon. Come." They set off. Eugene sat in silence, and after a while Delphine said, "What's the matter now?" "I can hear your father's death rattle," he replied with a touch of anger. And he began with the vehement eloquence of youth to tell her of the barbarous cruelty to which vanity had driven Madame de Restaud, of her father's desperate illness brought on by his supreme act of self-devotion, and what the cost of Anastasia's lame dress would be. Delphine wept. Then she thought, "I'm going to look a fright," and that thought dried her tears. "I will nurse father. I will not leave his beside," she said. "Ah, now you are as I wanted you to be," cried Rastignac. Excuse me. Dry throat indeed. Sorry. "Now you are as I wanted you to be," cried Rastignac. "The lamps of 500 carriages lit up." The lamps of 500 carriages lit up the approaches to the Hotel de Basson. On either side of the brightly lighted gateway, a gendarme stood magnificently. The fashionable world hurried with such eagerness to see the great lady at the moment of her downfall, and came in such numbers that the reception rooms on the ground floor of the mansion were already full to overflowing when Madame de Nucingen and Rastignac appeared. Never since the days when the whole court rushed to call on La Grande Mademoiselle, when Louis XIV tore her lover from her, had a disastrous love affair made such a stir in Paris. Yet in this tragic situation, the youngest daughter of the quasi-royal house of Burgundy rose above her pain, and till the last moment dominated the social world, whose vanities had been acquiesced in only that they might serve the triumph of her passion. "Yikes, my throat!" cried Old Goriot. Annotated. The most beautiful women in Paris adorned the animated scene with their exquisite dresses and their smiles. The most distinguished men at court, ambassadors, ministers, illustrious men from every sphere, bedizened with decorations, stars, multicolored ribbons, thronged about the Viscountess. Orchestral music rose and fell in waves of sound under the gilded ceilings of this palace, with which its queen, was desolate. Madame de Basson stood at the door of her first salon to receive her so-called friends. She was dressed in white, and wore no ornament in her simply braided hair. Her face was serene, and showed no sign of grief, or pride, or of forced gaiety. No one could read her heart. She looked like a marble Niobe. When she greeted her intimate friends, her smile was sometimes mocking, but she appeared to everyone so like her usual self, so exactly as she had been when radiant happiness adorned her like a jewel, that the most callous and insensitive admired her, as young Roman women applauded the gladiator who could smile at the movement of death. It seemed as if society had arrayed itself to bid farewell to one of its sovereigns. "I was afraid that you might not come," she said to Rastignac. "Madam," he said in a voice that shook with emotion, taking these words as a reproach, "I shall be the very last to leave you. That is why I have come." "Good," she said, and she took his hand. "You are perhaps the only one here whom I can trust. My friend, when you love a woman whom you can love forever. Never forsake a woman." She took Rastignac's arm and went towards a sofa in the room where guests were playing cards. "Go to the Marquis," she said. "Jacques, my footman, will go with you, and he will give you a letter addressed to the Marquis. I'm asking him for my letters. He will give them all up. I like to think that. When you have my letters, go upstairs to my room. Someone will let me know." She rose to meet the Duchess de Langrèze, her best friend, who was coming to join them. Rastignac went out and called at the Hotel de Roquefide, where he knew the Marquis de 𝐎𝐥𝐿 was most probably spending the evening, and when he asked for him, he was admitted. The Marquis invited the student to accompany him to his own house, where he handed over a box, saying as he did so, "They are all there." He seemed to wish to say something more, to ask Eugene about the ball, or about the Viscountess, or possibly to confess to him that he was even then in despair about his marriage, as later he was known to be. but a proud light flashed suddenly in his eyes, and with deplorable courage he kept his noblest feelings secret. "Say nothing about me to her, my dear Eugene." He pressed Eugene's hand affectionately and sadly, and turned away. The student went back to the Hotel des Bassins, and the servant showed him to the Viscountess's room. There he saw preparations for departure. He sat down near the fire, looked at the cedarwood casket, and sank into a profoundly melancholy dream. In his eyes, Madame de Bassins had a more than human grandeur. She was like a goddess in the Iliad. "Ah, my friend," said the Viscountess. She went straight to Rastignac and laid her hand on his shoulder. He saw that his cousin was in tears, and he felt her hand tremble. Her other hand was raised to take the casket, and her eyes looked upward. Suddenly she took the box, put it in the fire, and watched it burn. "They are dancing. They all came very promptly, but death will delay its coming. Hush, my friend," she said, and she put her finger on Rastignac's lips as he was about to speak. "I shall never see Paris or this world again. At 5 o'clock in the morning I am leaving here to go and bury myself in the remotest part of Normandy. I have been busy since 3 this afternoon, making my preparations, signing documents, setting my affairs in order. There was no one I could send to—" She broke off. "I knew he was sure to be at—" She stopped again, as grief overcame her. At such moments as these, everything is agony, and certain words it is impossible to utter. "In short," she went on, "I counted on you this evening to do me this last service. I should like to give you some token of my friendship. I shall think of you often. You have seemed to me to be kind and noble, unspoiled and open-hearted in this world where such qualities are rare. I wish you to think sometimes of me. Ah," she said, glancing about her, "here is the box I used to keep my gloves in. Every time I took them out before going to a ball or a play, I used to feel I must be beautiful because I was happy. And I never handled it, but I left some pleasant thought with it. There is much of myself in this. There's a whole Madame de Bassins who no longer exists. Now it is for you. Will you accept it? I will take care that it is sent to you at the Rue d'Artois. Madame de Nucingen looks very well this evening, and you must love her tenderly. If we see each other no more, my friend, be sure that I shall pray for you, who have been so good to me. Let us go downstairs now. I do not want to let people think that I am weeping. I have eternity before me to weep in. I shall be alone, and no one will ask me the reason of my tears. One last look around this room." She stood there silently. Then, after hiding her eyes for a moment with her hand, she wiped away the tears, bathed her face with cold water, and took the student's arm. "Let us go," she said. No experience in Rastignac's life had ever stirred his heart so deeply as this contact with suffering borne with such fortitude. They returned to the ball, and Madame de Bassins went through the rooms in Eugene's arm, a last graceful act of kindness on the part of this gracious woman. The student's eyes soon picked out the two sisters, Madame de Rostaud and Madame de Nucingen, from the throng. The Countess was magnificent in all the splendor of her diamonds. They must have scorched her. This is the last time she would ever wear them. Strong as her pride and her love might be, when she met her husband's glance, her eyes fell. Such a sight was not calculated to lighten Rastignac's sad thoughts. Beyond the diamonds of the two sisters, he saw again the mean pallet on which old Goriot lay. The Viscountess misunderstood his gloom and withdrew her hand from his arm. "Come," she said, "I must not deprive you of a pleasure." Eugene was soon claimed by Delphine, in high spirits at the impression she was making, and eager to lay at the student's feet the homage she was receiving in this new world which she was hoping would take her up. "What do you think, Nassy?" she asked him. "Oh, I'm sorry. What do you think of Nassy?" she asked him. "She has turned her father's very death into cash," said Rastignac. About 4 o'clock in the morning, the crowd in the reception rooms began to grow less dense. Presently the music ceased, and a little later the Duchess de Langeais and Rastignac were left alone in the great ballroom. The Viscountess, thinking that she would find no one there but the student, came back there when she had said goodbye to Monsieur de Basson, who said again, as he went off to bed, "It is quite wrong, my dear, to go and shut yourself up at your age. Do stay with us." When he saw the Duchess, Madame de Basson could not suppress an exclamation. "I guessed what you had. I guessed what was in your mind, Clara," said Madame de Langeais. "You are leaving us." "Maybe it's long ago. You are leaving us, and will never return to us again. But you must not go without hearing what I have to say, without our understanding one another." She took her friend's arm, and they went together to the next room, and there, looking at her with tears in her eyes, the Duchess clasped her in her arms and kissed her cheek. "I will not part from you in coldness, my dear. I could not bear such a heavy burden of regret as that would lay on me hereafter," she said. "You can rely on me as if I were yourself. You have been truly great this evening. I felt I must show you that I too could raise to such heights, that I was worthy of our friendship. I have borne ill will to you. I have not always been kind. Forgive me, my dear. I take back all that may have wounded you. I wish I could unsay my words. Our hearts are now united by a common sorrow, for I do not know which of us is the more unhappy. Monsieur de Montrevaux was not here this evening. Do you understand what that means? No one who saw you at this ball, Clara, will ever forget you. I intend to make one last effort. If I fail, I shall enter a convent. Where are you going, Clara? To Normandy, to Conchelles. I shall love and pray there until the day it pleases God to take me from this world. Monsieur de Rastignac, called the Viscountess in a voice that shook as she recollected that the young man was waiting. The student knelt and kissed his cousin's hand. "Farewell, Antoinette," said Madame de Basson. "May you be happy. I need not say that to you," she added, turning to the student. "You are young. You can still trust and believe in something. As I take leave of this world, I am sustained, as a few privileged people are on their deathbeds, by sincere and reverent feeling in those about me." Rastignac came away about 5 o'clock in the morning, when he had seen Madame de Basson in her travelling coach, when he had received her last farewells, over which she shed tears, For the most exalted personages are not placed beyond the reach of a common emotion, and do not live without pain, as some who court the people would have them believe. Eugene walked back to the Maison Vauquer in the damp, cold morning. His education was nearly complete. "We're not going to be able to save poor old Goriot," said Biancan as Rastignac entered his neighbor's room. Eugene gazed for a while at the old man sleeping, and then turned to his friend. "Dear Biancan," he said, "you are quite right to be content to stick to the modest career you have marked out for yourself. Don't turn aside from it. I am in hell, and must stay there. Believe whatever evil you may hear about the world, it's all true. No Juvenal could adequately paint its gilded and bejeweled horrors." Rastignac had wakened about 2 that afternoon by Biancan, who was obliged to go out, and asked him to look after Old Goriot, whose condition had become much worse during the morning. "The old fellow has not 2 days to live. Perhaps not 6 hours. "The old fellow," said the medical student. "But we must not stop trying to fight the disease. We should have to give him his expensive treatment, and we're all going to need some money. We can do the nursing between us all right, but I haven't got a penny. I have turned out his pockets and rummaged his cupboards. Result? 0. I asked him about it when he had a lucid spell, and he told me he hadn't a farthing of his own. What have you got?" "I have 20 francs left," said Rastignac, "but I will throw it at the roulette table. I am bound to win. And if you lose, I shall ask his sons-in-law and daughters for money." "And suppose they won't give you any," persisted Biancan. "However, finding money is not the most urgent thing right now. We must wrap his feet and legs in boiling hot mustard poultice. If he cries out, there is still some hope for him. You know how to do it. Besides, Christophe will help you. I'm going to call at the dispensary and ask them to give us credit for all the things we shall need. It's a pity we couldn't move him out of our hospital. The poor fellow, he would have been better off there. But come along, and let me hand over my charge to you. Don't leave him until I come back." The 2 young men returned to the room where the old man lay. Eugene was dismayed by the change in old Goriot's face. It was distorted, pallid, and utterly exhausted. "Well, Papa," he said, bending over the wretched bed. Goriot raised dull eyes to Eugene's face and scrutinized him carefully without a sign of recognition. It was more than the student could bear. Tears sprang to his eyes. "Biancan, should we not have curtains for the window?" "No, light and air do not affect him now, and it would be too good a sign to be true if he felt heat or cold. All the same, we need a fire for heating drinks and preparing all the other things. I will send you a few bundles of sticks that to do until we get firewood. I burned yours yesterday and during the night, and all the peat he had, poor man. It was so damp that water was dripping from the walls. I could hardly keep the room dry. Christophe came in and swept it. It's really a pigsty. I burnt juniper to kill all the horrible smells." "Good heavens," said Rastignac, "and just to think of his daughters." "Look here, if he asks for a drink, give him some of this," said the medical student, showing Rastignac a large white pitcher. "If you hear him groan, it's his abdomen, and his abdomen is hot and hard to the touch. Get Christophe to help you. You know what to do. If he should get wildly excited and talk a great deal, even if he is slightly delirious, don't worry, it will not be a bad sign. But send Christophe to the Hospice Cochin. Our doctor, or my fellow student, or I, will come and apply moxas. This morning, while you were sleeping, we had a grand consultation. A pupil of Dr. Gals was here, and the senior physician from the Hotel d'Eau, and our own chief. This gentleman thought there were unusual features in the case, and we are going to study the progress of the disease, and if it may throw some light on several rather important scientific problems. One of the doctors declared that he should show particular preoccupations according to the region of the brain affected by the pressures of serum. So listen to him carefully if he talks, and note to what category of ideas what he says belongs. Whether he uses his memory, or his powers of perception or judgment, whether his thoughts are concerned with material matters or feelings, whether he makes plans for the future or returns to the past. In short, be prepared to give us an exact report. It may be the serum is invading his entire brain, in which case he will die in his present vacancy of mind. It is impossible to predict any normal course for these diseases. Suppose the shock came here, said Biancan, pointing to the back of the sick man's head. There are instances of very odd things happening. The brain may recover some of its faculties, and death is delayed. The matter may drain away from his brain by channels that can only be determined by a post-mortem. At the hospital for incurables, there's an imbecile old man in whose case the discharge took the direction of the spinal cord. He suffers horribly, but he's alive. Did they have a good time? Said Old Goriot, recognizing Eugene. Oh, he thinks of nothing but his daughters, said Biancan. He said to me dozens of times last night, "They are dancing now. She has her dress." He called their names. He made me cry, the devil take it, calling, "Delphine, my own little Delphine, Nasi," in such tone of voice. Upon my word, said the medical student, it was enough to make anyone burst into tears. Delphine, said the old man. She is there, isn't she? I knew she was. His eyes took on a wild restlessness, and he stared at the walls of the door. At the walls and the door. I'm going downstairs to tell Sylvie to get the poultices ready, said Biancan. It's a good time to apply them, now. Rastignac was left alone with the old man. He sat at the foot of the bed and gazed at that shocking and pitiful face. Madame de Bausson has fled the city, and this man lies here dying, he said. Noble creatures cannot long endure this world. How indeed should deep and noble feelings find a place in such a shallow, petty, mean society? Scenes from the ball the previous evening rose to his mind, to contrast strangely with the deathbed he was watching. Suddenly, Biancan reappeared. See here, Eugene. I've just seen our senior doctor at the hospital, and I ran all the way back here. If he shows any sign of sanity, if he speaks, lay him on a long mustard poultice, and see that it covers him from the nape of his neck to the base of his spine, and send for us. Dear Biancan, said Eugene. Oh, he's an interesting case from a medical point of view, returned the medical student, with a neophyte's ardor. Well, well, said Eugene, so I'm the only one to care for an old man through affection for him. You would not say that if you had seen me this morning, Biancan replied, without a sign of offense. Practicing doctors, after a while, see nothing but the disease, but I can still see the patient, my dear fellow. He went away, leaving Eugene alone with the old man, and apprehensive of a crisis, which in fact was not long in appearing. Ah, is it you, dear child? Said Old Goriot, recognizing Eugene. Do you feel better? Asked the student, taking his hand. Yes. My head felt as if it were gripped in a vice, but it's growing easier now. Did you see my girls? They're coming here directly. They will rush here as soon as they know I'm ill. They always took such care of me in the Rue de la Joacine. Good heavens, I wish my room was fit to receive them in. There is a young man here who burnt all my peat." "Here, Christophe," said Eugene. "He is bringing up wood, sent you by that same young man." "That's good. But how am I going to pay for the wood? I haven't a penny left, child. I have given everything away. Everything. I'm a beggar now. But at least the gold dress was lovely, wasn't it? Oh, that pain. Thank you, Christophe. God will reward you, my boy. I have nothing left myself. I'll pay you well, and Sylvie too, for what you are doing for him," Eugene whispered to the man. "My daughters told you that they were coming, didn't they, Christophe? Go back to them. I will give you 5 francs for your trouble. Tell them that I don't feel well, and that I should like to kiss them, to see them once more before I die. Tell them that, but don't alarm them any more than you can help." Rastignac signed to him obey the old man, and Christophe went. "They are sure to come," Goriot began again. "I know them. Delphine has such a tender heart. If I die, what grief she will feel. Nassy, too. I would rather not die, because I don't want to make them cry. And if I die, dear Eugene, I shall not see them any more. That's what death means. There, where I am going, I shall be very lonely. For a father, hell is to be childless, and I have already served my apprenticeship to that since they got married. My heaven was in the Rue de la Jessie. Tell me, if I go to heaven, do you think I may return in spirit to be near them? I have heard tell of such things. Are they true? I see them now in my mind as they were when we lived in the Rue de la Jessie. They used to come downstairs in the morning. 'Good morning, Papa,' they would say. I took them on my knee. I had all sorts of teasing pranks to play on them, and they were delighted. They used to put their arms around me so sweetly. We breakfasted together every morning. They had dinner with me too. In short, I was a father then. I rejoiced in my children. When they lived in the Rue de la Jessie, they did not question my authority in anything. They knew nothing of the world. They loved me dearly. Oh, God, why could they not be children always? Oh, my head, what racking pain this is. Forgive me, children. I am a horrible pain, and it must really be pain. You have hardened me well to endure mere headache. Oh, God, if I could only hold their hands in mine, I should not feel my pain. Do you think they are on the way? Christophe is so stupid. I ought to have gone myself. He will get a sight of them. But you were at the ball yesterday. Tell me about them. How did they look? They don't know anything about my illness, do they? They would not have danced, poor little things, if they had known. Oh, I must not be ill any longer. They still need me too much. Their fortunes are in danger. And to what husbands they are bound. Cure me. Cure me. Oh, what pain this is. See here, you must make me well, because they need money. And I know where to get it. I'll go to Odessa and manufacture starch. I know the ropes. I'll make millions that way. Oh, I cannot endure it. Goriot was silent for a moment. He seemed to be summoning all of his powers of endurance to bear the pain. If they were here, I should not groan, he said. So why should I groan now? A state of drowsiness supervened, and he lay quietly for a long time. Christophe came back, and Rastignac, thinking Goriot was asleep, did not restrain him from telling his story aloud. I went first of all to the Madame de Comtesse, sir, he said. But I couldn't get speaking to her. She was busy talking about something important with her husband. When I said I must see her, Monsieur de Restaud came himself and said, "Monsieur Goriot is dying, is he? Well, it's the best thing he can do." He said, just like that. "I need Madame de Restaud to complete important business," he said. She can go when it's finished." He looked very angry, that gentleman did. I was just going to go out when Madame came into the anteroom through a door I hadn't noticed, and she said, "Christophe, tell my father I'm discussing some matters with my husband, and I can't leave him just now. It's a life and death matter for my children," she said, "but I'll come as soon as it's settled. As for Madame la Baronne, that's another tale. I didn't even see her, let alone speak to her." "Ah," said the lady's maid, "Madame will come from the ball at the 5:15. She's asleep now. If I wake her before 12, she will give me a wigging. I will tell her that your father is worse when she rings for me. Bad news will keep, I suppose." It was no use begging and imploring that lady. Oh dear, no, though I tried it. And I asked for Monsieur le Baron, but he had gone out. "To think that neither of his daughters is coming," Rastignac exclaimed. "I'll write to them both." "Neither of them," cried the old man, sitting up. "They are busy. They are sleeping. They will not come. I knew it. You have to die to know what your children are. Oh, my friend, do not marry. Do not have children. You give them life. They give you death in return. You bring them into the world. They push you from it. No, they will not come. I have known that for the last 10 years. I sometimes told myself so, but I did not dare believe it." Tears gathered and stood in his red-rimmed eyes, but did not fall. "Ah, if I were rich, if I had kept my money, if I had not given it all to them, they would be here now. They would fawn on me and cover my cheeks with their kisses. I should be living in a grand house. I should have fine rooms, servants, a fire in my room, all for myself, and they would be there dissolved in tears, and their husbands and their children's. I should have all that, but I have nothing. Money buys everything, even daughters. Oh, my money, where has it gone? If I had riches to leave them, they would comfort my pain. They would nurse me. I should hear their voices. I should see their faces. No, my dear child, my only child, it is better to be desolate than miserable. At least when a poor wretch is loved, he's quite sure that it is love. No, I wish I were rich. I should see them then. But who knows if I should? They both have hearts of stone. I loved them too much for them to have much love for me. A father ought always to be rich. He ought to curb his children as he would unruly horses, and I let them trample on me. The wretches, in this last act, their conduct towards me during the last 10 years reaches its proper climax. If you only knew how they plied me with little attentions in the early days of their marriages, the pain is cruel torture. I had just given them both nearly 800,000 francs. They couldn't be disagreeable to me after that, nor could their husbands either. When I went to their house, it was, "My kind father here, my good father there." There was always a place for me at their tables, and indeed I used to dine with their husbands, and they treated me with respect. They thought I still had something. What reason had they to think otherwise? I had said nothing about my affairs. A man who gave away 800,000 francs to each of his daughters was a man to cherish. And they were very attentive to me. But it was for the sake of my money. Fine feathers don't always make fine birds. I found that out myself. I used to go to the theater with them in the carriages, and I stayed as long as I liked in the evenings at their parties. In short, they publicly called themselves my daughters, and owned me as their father, but I am still sharp enough, you know, and nothing escaped me. It was all calculated for a purpose, and that cut me to the heart. I saw very well that it was just a show and pretense, but what could I do about it? I did not feel at home at their dinner table as I do at the table downstairs. I could not join the conversations. Some of those fine society folks would ask my son-in-law in a whisper, "Who is that gentleman?" "That's the father-in-law with the money bags. He's very rich." "The deuce he is." That was the way the conversations went, and they looked at me again, with this respect due to money bags. Well, if I was sometimes a little awkward, I paid dearly for my shortcomings. Besides, who is perfect? My head feels like an open wound. At this moment, I am suffering what a man has to go through in order to die, my dear Monsieur Eugene. Well, it's nothing in comparison with the agony that Anastasia inflicted upon me with the first look that made it clear to me that I had just said something stupid which made her feel humiliated. Her look made me sweat blood. I should have liked to be an educated man, to know all about everything, but one thing I did know beyond the possibility of doubt: I was not wanted here on earth. Next day I went to Delphine for consolation, and what should I do but commit some blunder again and make her angry with me. I nearly went crazy because of it. For a week I did not know what I ought to do. I did not dare to go and see them for fear of their reproaches, and there I was outside my daughter's door. Oh, God! Since you know the misery, the suffering I endured, since you have counted the wounds inflicted in the years which have aged me, changed me, broken my heart, turned my hair white, why do you make me suffer now today? I have expiated to the full the sin of loving them too much. They themselves have been the instruments of vengeance. They have tortured me like executioners. Yes, fathers are such simpletons. I loved them so. I returned to them as a gambler to the gambling table. They were my own particular vice. They took the place of another man fills with her mistresses. That's the whole story. They were both always needing some frippery or other. Their maids would tell me what they wanted, and I would give it to them for the sake of being met with smiling faces. But they gave me a few little lessons all the same on how I should behave in society. Oh, they lost no time about it. They were beginning to be ashamed of me. That's what comes of bringing your children up well. At my age, however, I could not go to school. Oh, God! The pain is terrible. Doctors, if they opened my head it would hurt less. My daughters, Anastasia, Delphine, I must see them. Send the police to fetch them. Compel them to come. Justice is on my side. Everything is on my side. Natural affection and the law as well. I protest. The country will go to ruin if the fathers are trampled underfoot. The thing is clear as day. Society, the whole world, turns on fatherly love. Everything falls to pieces if children do not love their fathers. Oh, if only I could see them, hear them, no matter what they have to say. Just the sound of their voices would soothe my pain, especially Delphine's voice. But tell me, when they come, not to look so coldly at me as they do. But tell them when they come not to look so coldly at me as they do. Monsieur Eugene, my good friend, you do not know what it is to see the radiant gold of a look change suddenly into dull, chilling lead. On the day when the sunshine of their look clouded over me, the winter of my life set in. Disappointment has been my daily bread, and I accepted it. I have lived on humiliations and insult. I loved them so much that I swallowed all the affronts with which they sold me for a few poor little clandestine moments of joy. Think of it, a father hiding himself to catch a glimpse of his daughters. I have given them my life, and they could not give me 1 hour today. I hunger and thirst to see them. My heart is on fire within me, and they will not come to soothe the pangs of death, for this is death. I feel that I am dying. Don't they know, then, what it means to trample on one father's corpse? There is a God in heaven, and we fathers are avenged, whether we wish it or not. No, but they will come. Come, my darlings. Come and kiss me once more. Give me one last kiss. That viaticum for your father, who will pray to God for you in heaven. Who will tell him that you have been good daughters, who will plead for you. After all, it is not your fault. They are innocent, my friend. Tell everyone that. Let no one be distressed on my account. It is all my fault. I taught them to trample me underfoot. That was how I liked it to be, and it's nobody's business but mine. It's no concern of human justice or God's justice. God would be unjust if he condemned them for their behavior towards me. I do not know how to treat them. I was stupid enough to resign my rights. I should have humbled myself in the dust for them. What could you expect? Such weakness on the part of a father would have corrupted the finest nature, the noblest soul. I am a wretch, and I am justly punished. I am the cause, and the only cause, of their unfilial conduct. I spoilt them. Today they want pleasure. Today they want pleasure as they used to want sweets. I always indulged them in all their childish whims. They had a carriage of their own when they were 15. Nothing was denied them. I only, am to blame. But I sinned through love to them. Their voice melted my heart. I hear them. They are coming. Oh, yes, they will come. The law demands that they should come to see their father die. The law is on my sides. Beside, it will only cost the hire of a cab for one drive, and I will pay for it. Write and tell them that I have millions to leave them. On my word of honor, it's true. I am going to Odessa to manufacture Italian wheaten paste foods. I know how to do it. I have a scheme, and I shall make millions out of it. No one else has thought of it. You see, the stuff does not damage in transit as grain and flour does. Starch, too. There will be millions to be made in starch. Millions, tell them. You will not be telling a lie, and even if it's greed that brings them, I would rather shut my eyes to that. At any rate, I shall see them. I want my daughters. It was I who made them. They are mine. And the old man suddenly sat up and presented to Eugene's gaze a defiant head, crowned with scanty white hair, and a face that expressed a threat in every line. There, said Eugene. Lie down again, dear Father Goriot. I will write to them now. As soon as Biancan comes back, I will go for them if they do not come. If they do not come, repeated the old man, sobbing. But I shall be dead by then. Dead in a burst of rage. Rage! Rage is getting the upper hand of me. Now I see my whole life. I have been duped. They do not love me. They have never loved me. That is clear as day. If they have not come by now, they will not come. The longer they delay, the less easily will they bring themselves to give me this joy. I know them. They had never had any perception of my disappointments and sorrows, or my need of them. They will not be able to imagine my death, either. It is just that their minds are shut to the nature of my tenderness for them. Yes, I see it now. Because I always gave them my whole heart as a matter of course, My gifts were cheap in their eyes. If I had wanted to put out my eyes, I would have told them to do it. I was a fool. To think all fathers are like theirs. You should never allow yourself to be held cheap. Their children will avenge me. You see, it is to their interest to come here. Warn them that they are imperiling the peace of their own deathbeds. They are committing every crime when they commit this one. Go and tell them not to come is parricide. They have enough of their conscience without adding that sin. Go and shout like this: Nasse, Delphine, come to your father, who has been so good to you, and who is now suffering pain. No answer. Nobody comes. Am I to die, then, like a dog? So this is my reward, to be forsaken? Oh, they are vile, stony-hearted women. My curse upon them. I abhor them. I shall rise from the grave at night and curse them again. For indeed, my friend, don't you think I'm right? They are behaving very badly, aren't they? What am I saying? Didn't you tell me that Delphine was here? She has more heart than her sister. You are my son, Eugene. You must love her. Be a father to her. The other child is very unhappy. And what about their fortunes? Oh God, I am dying. I cannot endure this pain. Cut off my head. Leave me only my heart. Christophe! Shouted Eugene, alarmed by the increasing desperation of the old man's groans and cries. Go and fetch Biancan, and get me a cab. I am going to your daughters, dear Father Goriot. I'll bring them back to you. Compel them. Make them come. Call out the guard, troops of the line, everyone, everything, he said, looking at Eugene with eyes that still held the last gleam of reason. Tell the government, the public prosecutor, they must be brought to me. I demand their presence. But you have cursed them. Who said that? Said the old man in dull amazement. You know very well that I love them. I adore them. If I see them, I shall be cured. Fetch them, my good neighbor, my dear child. You're a kind boy. I wish I could show how grateful I am to you, but I have nothing to give you but a dying man's blessings. If I could only sell Delphine, I would tell her to pay my debt to you. If her sister cannot come, bring Delphine to me. Tell her you won't love her any more if she will not come. She cares so much for you that she will come then. Give me something to drink. I'm on fire inside. Put something on my head. I know my daughter's hands could save me. I feel it in my bones. God, who will build up their fortunes again if I go? I must go to Odessa for their sake. Go to Odessa and manufacture vermicelli. Drink this, said Eugene, raising the dying man and holding him in his left arm as he held a cup of tisane to his lips. It's easy to see that you love your father and mother, said the old man, clutching Eugene's hand with both his feeble, trembling hands. Do you understand that I am going to die without seeing them? Without seeing my girls? I have been thirsty for 10 years, and they have never quenched my thirst. My sons-in-laws killed my daughters. Yes, I was bereaved of daughters when they got married. Fathers, tell the chambers they must pass laws against marriages. Don't let your daughters marry if you love them. A son-in-law is a scoundrel who spoils everything in a girl's heart. He corrupts her own nature. Let there be no more marriages. They carry off our daughters, they rob us of them, and we are left alone when we come to die. Pass a law for dying fathers. It is shocking. It cries for vengeance. If they would come, if my son-in-laws did not prevent them, kill them. Strike down Restaud. Kill the assassin. They are my murderers. Death or my daughters. Oh, this is the end. I am dying, and they are not with me. Dying without them. Nasi, Delphine, why do you not come? Your father is going to Father Goriot. Keep calm. There, stay quiet. Set your heart at rest. Don't think. Not to see them. There is death's sting. But you shall see them. Truly, cried the distracted old man. Oh, shall I see them? I shall see them and hear their voices. I shall die happy. Indeed, I don't ask to live any longer. I did not care to any more. Things are getting worse and worse. But just to see them, touch their dresses. Just touch their dresses. That's not much to ask. Let me feel something of theirs. Let me lay my fingers on their hair. The hair. His head fell back on the pillow as if he had been... His head fell back on the pillow as if he had been clubbed. His hands moved on the coverlet as if they were groping for his daughter's hair. My blessing on them, he said with an effort. Bless. His voice suddenly failed. At that moment, Biancan came into the room. I met Christophe, he said. He's gone to fetch you a cab. Then he looked at the old, sick man and pulled back the closed eyelids with one finger, revealing, as the two students watch, eyes grown cold and lusterless. He will not come round from this, said Biancan. At least I think it's unlikely. He felt the old man's pulse and then laid a hand on his heart. The mechanism still works, but in this case it's a pity. It would be far better if he died. Oh, yes, indeed it would, said Rastignac. What's the matter? You're as pale as death. Oh, Biancan, you don't know what cries of lamentations I've been listening to. There is a God. Oh, yes, there is a God. He has made a better world for us, or this earth is blank and meaningless. If it had not been so tragic, I should weep and feel better, but the thing lies like a dreadful weight on my heart. We're not going to need a lot of things, you know. We're going to need a lot of things, you know. Where can we get money? Rastignac pulled out his watch. Take that, and pawn it as soon as you can. I don't want to stop on the way to the Rue des Elder. I don't want to stop on the way to the Rue des Elder, for I'm afraid to lose a minute, and I must wait here for Christophe. I haven't a farthing. My cabman will have to wait for payment till I come back again. Rastignac rushed down the stairs and drove off to Madame de Rostard's home in the Rue des Elder. To his imagination, as he went, he lived again the terrible scenes he had witnessed, and his indignation rose to boiling point. When he arrived at the house, he asked for Madame de Rostard. He was told that she could not see him. But I have come from her father, who is dying, he said to the footman. Monsieur le Comte has given us the strictest orders, sir. If Monsieur de Rostard is at home, inform him of his father-in-law's condition, and tell him that I must see him at once. Eugene was kept waiting a long time. Perhaps he is dying at this very moment, he thought. The man came back and showed the student to a smaller drawing-room where Monsieur de Rostard was standing before a fireless grate. He did not invite his visitor to sit down. Monsieur le Comte, said Rastignac, Monsieur Goriot, your father-in-law, lies dying at this moment in squalor in a mean, poverty-stricken room, and he has not even a farthing to buy firewood. He is at the point of death, and he is calling for his daughter. Monsieur, the Comte replied stiffly. As you may have occasion to note, I feel very little affection for Monsieur Goriot. He has shown himself in an extremely discreditable light in connection with Madame de Restaud. He is the author of misfortunes that have ruined my life and destroyed my domestic happiness. It is a matter of complete indifference to me whether he lives or dies, and there you have my feelings with regard to Monsieur Goriot. Public opinion may blame me, but I care nothing for that. I have more important things to do at the moment than to worry about what fools or strangers are going to think of me. As for Madame de Restaud, she is not in a fit state to go out. Besides, I do not wish her to leave the house. Tell her father that as soon as she has done her duty by me and my child, she shall go to see him. If she loves her father, she can be free in a few moments, if it's as she chooses. Monsieur le Comte, it is not for me to criticize your conducts where your master in this house, but can I count on your keeping your word to me? Well, then, promise me that you will tell her that your father has not a day to live, that he looks to find her at his bedside, and cursed her when she did not come. You may tell her that yourself, Monsieur de Restaud answered, impressed by the fierce indignation expressed in Eugene's voice. Rastignac followed the Count to the drawing-room the Countess habitually used. He found her drowned in tears, crouched in the depths of a large armchair as if she were in despair and longed for death. She was a pitiful sight, and he felt sorry for her. She did not look at Rastignac, but darted timid glances at her husband, which showed her complete prostration, body and soul, under the weight of her husband's tyranny. The Count nodded, and she took this as permission to speak. I heard all you said, monsieur. Tell my father that if he knew my plight, he would forgive me. I did not expect to have to bear such torture as this. And it is more than I can stand, monsieur. But I shall never give in, she added, turning to her husband. I am a mother. Tell my father that I am not to blame for the way I have treated him, in spite of appearances. Her voice had the heavy vehemence of despair. Eugene bowed to the husband and wife and went away, feeling stunned. He guessed at the horrible dilemma that confronted Madame de Restaud. Monsieur de Restaud's tone had shown him the uselessness of his errand, and he understood that Anastasie was no longer free to act as she chose. He hurried to Madame de Nucingen and found her in bed. I am ill, my poor dear, she said. I caught a chill coming back from the ball, and I'm afraid of inflammation of the lungs. I'm waiting for the doctor. Even if you're at death's door, Eugene broke in, you must drag yourself somehow to your father's bedside. He is calling for you. If you could hear the faintest of his cries, you would not feel ill any longer. Eugene, father is perhaps not quite as ill as you say, but I should hate you to disapprove of me even the least little bit, and I will do exactly as you want me to. Father would die of grief, I know, if I made my illness much worse by going out to see him. Well, I'll go as soon as I've seen my doctor. Why are you not wearing your watch? She cried out as she noticed that the chain was missing. Eugene reddened. Eugene, if you have sold it already, or lost it, oh, it will really be bad of you. The student leant over Delphine's bed and said in her ear, Do you want to hear the truth about it? Well, here it is. Your father has not enough money to pay for the shroud in which he will be laid this evening. Your watch is at the pawn shop. I had nothing left. Delphine at once sprang out of bed, ran to her desk, took her purse from it, and held it to Rastignac. She rang, exclaimed as she did so, I'm going at once, Eugene. Just give me time to get dressed. Oh, I should be a monster if I did not go. Go back to him. I will be there before you. Therese, she called to her maid, ask Monsieur de Nucingen to come upstairs and speak to me this very moment. Eugene was so glad to be able to tell the dying man that one of his daughters was coming that he felt almost happy when he reached the Rue Neuve Sainte-Geneviève. He fumbled in Delphine's purse for money to pay the cabman at once, and found that the purse of this wealthy young woman of fashion contained exactly 70 francs. He went upstairs and found old Goriot sitting up, supported by Biancan, while the house surgeon from the hospital was applying moxas to his back under the supervision of the physician. It was the last resort of medicine, and, in this case, useless. Can you feel them? The physician asked, but old Goriot had caught sight of the student and only said, They're coming, aren't they? He may rally, said the surgeon, since he can speak. Yes, Eugene answered the old man. Delphine is on the way. That doesn't mean anything, Biancan said to the surgeon. He was talking about his daughters. He's been calling for them as a man impaled on a stake cries, so I've heard, for water. There's no use going on, said the physician. There's nothing more we can do. He's finished. Biancan and the surgeon laid the dying man down again at full length on his revolting bed. All the same, his linen ought to be changed, the physician said. Even though there is no hope, some respect is due to the suffering humanity. I shall come back again. Biancan, he went on, turning to the student, if he complains again, rub laudanum on his diaphragm. The physician and the house surgeon went out together. Come, Eugene, cheer up, my boy, said Biancan when they were left alone. We must put a clean shirt on him and see about changing his sheets. Go tell Sylvie to bring up sheets and to come and help us. Eugene went downstairs and found Sylvie helping Madame Vaucher to lay the table. Rastignac had hardly opened his mouth before the widow bore down on him with the acidly sweet graciousness of a wary shopkeeper who is anxious neither to lose her money nor to offend her customer. My dear Monsieur Eugene, she said in answer to his request for sheets, you know as well as I do that old Goriot hasn't got a sou left. It's just throwing sheets away to give them to a man on the point of turning his toes up, especially as one will have to be used for the shroud, I suppose. And then you owe me 144 francs as it is. Add 40 francs to that for sheets, and there are several other little things. The candle Sylvie will give you is just one of them. Altogether, all that amounts to at least 200 francs, and the poor widow like me can't afford to lose much money. Come now, Monsieur Eugene, you must see what's right. I've lost quite enough in the last few days since fortune took a spite at me. I would give 10 crowns to have had that old fellow moved out of here, as you said he was going to. The other boarders don't like it. For 2 pins, I would get him taken. to the workhouse. Put yourself in my place, Monsieur Eugene. My establishment must come first. It's my living, after all. Eugene ran upstairs to Goriot's room. Biancan, where's the money for the watch? There, on the table. There's 360-odd francs left. I paid off what we owed. out of what I got for it. The pawn ticket is under the money. Monsieur Rastignac hurried downstairs again. Here, madam, he said with disgust. Let us settle our accounts. Monsieur Goriot has not much longer to stay under your roof, and yes, he will live here feet foremost, poor creature, she said, counting out 200 francs with a half-complacent, half-lugubrious expression on her face. Let's get done with this, said Rastignac. Bring the sheets, Sylvie, and go and help the gentleman upstairs. You won't forget Sylvie, she continued in a whisper to Eugene. She's been sitting up 2 nights now. As soon as Eugene's back was turned, the old woman ran after her cook. Take the sheets from number 7, the ones that were turned sides to middle, she muttered in her ear. Goodness knows, they're quite good enough for a corpse. Eugene was by this time halfway upstairs. He did not overhear the old boarding-house keeper. Come on, said Bianca. Let's change his shirt. Hold him up. Eugene went to the head of the bed and supporting the dying man, while Bianca pulled his shirt over his head. Goriot made a movement with his hands as if he were trying to protect something he held against his chest, and uttered mournful, inarticulate cries, like some dumb animal in overwhelming pain. Oh, yes, said Bianca. I know what he wants. It's a little locket of chain made of hair we took from him when we were putting on his moxas. Poor fellow. We must give it back to him. It's on the mantelshelf. Eugene went to fetch the chain of plaited hair, which was ash blonde in color, and was no doubt Madame Goriot's. On one side of the locket read Anastasie, and on the other Delphine. It was the symbol of Goriot's own heart that rested always on his breast. The curls of the hair were so soft and fine that they must have been cut when the 2 children were very tiny. When he felt the locket touch his chest, the old man heaved a long-drawn sigh of satisfaction. It was awe-inspiring to watch. This was one of the last signs of his capacity to respond to the outside world, and his sensibility withdrew itself to that mysterious center within from which all power of feeling comes, and to which all emotions appeal. His distorted face shone with delirious joy. This vehement manifestation of a force of feeling that had survived the power of thought affected the 2 students so deeply the tears fell on the dying man, who gave a piercing cry of delight. Nascin! Fifine! He is not done with life yet, said Bianca. And what does he go on living for? Said Sylvie. Only to suffer, answered Rastignac. Bianca, making a sign to his friend to follow his example, knelt down and passed his arms under the sick man's thighs, and Rastignac, kneeling on the other side of the bed, supported his back. Sylvie stood ready to pull away the sheets from underneath and replaced it one by one, those she had brought. Deluded, no doubt, by the tears he had felt, Goriot gathered all his remaining strength to stretch out his hands, which, on either side of the bed, encountered the students' heads. He clutched at their hair convulsively, and they heard a faint whisper, "Ah, my angels." 2 words, 2 murmurs, given meaning by the soul, which fled as they were spoken. Poor dear man, said Sylvie, touched by that exclamation. The expression of a supreme tenderness aroused for the last time by a most ghastly, most involuntary lie. The last sigh of this father was to be a sigh of joy. A sigh epitomized the feeling of a lifetime. He was cheated to the end. They laid old Goriot reverently down again on his wretched bed. From that moment his face held only painful reflections of the battle life and death were fighting in what was now no more than a machine, for the consciousness of the brain that makes the human being aware of pain and pleasure had gone. Total destruction was now only a question of time. He will lie like this for several hours, and die by imperceptible degrees. There will not even be a death rattle to tell us when he goes. The brain must be completely overrun. As 𝐆𝐿𝐴𝐿 spoke, a woman was heard coming, panting, upstairs. "She's too late," said Rastignac. But it was not Delphine. It was her maid, Therese. "Monsieur Eugene," she said, "there's been a terrible scene between Monsieur and Madame about some money my poor mistress wanted for her father. She fainted, and the doctors came, and she had to be bled, and she kept screaming, 'My father is dying, I want to see Papa!' Oh, cries and screams that would have broken your heart to hear." "That will do, Therese. It would be useless for her to come now. Monsieur Goriot has lost consciousness." "Poor dear gentleman. Is he as bad as that?" said Therese. "You don't need me anymore. I must go and see about my dinner. It's 4:30, interposed Sylvie. She bustled out, and barely missed colliding with Madame de Restaud at the top of the staircase. The Countess appeared in the doorway like some somber and terrible spectre. She looked at the deathbed in the dim light shed by a single candle, and wept at the sight of her father's mask-like face, where only an occasional tremor revealed the last flickerings of life. 𝐵𝐿𝐴𝐿 tactfully left the room. "I got away too late," she said to Rastignac. The student bowed sadly in answer. Madame de Restaud took her father's hand and kissed it. "Forgive me, father," she said. "You used to say that my voice would call you back from the tomb. Oh, return to life for one moment now to bless your penitent daughter. Oh, father, hear my voice. Oh, this is dreadful. No one in the world will ever bless me now but you. Everyone hates me. You are the only one on earth who loves me. Even my own children will hate me. Father, take me with you. I will love you. I will take care of you." He cannot hear me now. Oh, I'm out of my mind. She fell on her knees and stared wildly at the poor ruined body before her. "My cup of misery is full," she said, looking at Eugene. "Monsieur de Trellis has gone, leaving enormous debts behind him, and I have found out that he was deceiving me. My husband will never forgive me, and I have left my fortune at his disposal. I've no illusions left. I can see with clear eyes now. Alas, for whose sake did I betray the only heart where I was worshipped?" She gestured towards her father as she spoke. "I slighted him, turned my back on him, treated him unkindly, time out of number, miserable wretch that I am." "He knew it," said Rastignac. Just then, Goriot opened his eyes, but it was only the effect of a muscular contraction. The Countess's quick movement of awakened hope was a sight no less terrible to see than the sight of the dying man's eyes. "Can you hear me?" the Countess exclaimed. "No," she said to herself, sitting down beside the bed. Eugene understood that Madame de Restaud wished to watch by her father's side, and went downstairs to take some food. The boarders were already assembled. "Well," said the painter in a tone of inquiry, "it seems we're going to have a little death-o-rama up there, eh?" "I think you might choose a less painful subject for your jokes, Charles," Eugene said. "So we're not allowed to laugh here any more," retorted the painter. "What difference does it make? Biancan says that the old man is incapable of taking in anything now. In that case, said the official of the museum, he will die as he has lived. My father is dead, shrieked the countess. At that terrible cry, Sylvie, Rastignac, and Biancan ran upstairs, and they found Madame de Restaud had fainted. When they had revived her, they carried her down to the cab that was waiting at the door. Eugene confided her to Therese's care and told the maid to take her to Madame de Nucingen. Biancan joined them then again. Yes, he's dead, he said. Come, gentlemen, sit down and let's have dinner, said Madame Vauquer. The soup will be getting cold. Two students took their places together. What's to be done now? Eugene asked Biancan. Well, I've closed his eyes and arranged him decently. When we have reported the death at the mayor's office, and the doctor there has duly certified it, we'll sew him in his shroud and bury him. What else should we do with him? He'll never sniff at his bread like this again, said one of the boarders, mimicking the old man's trick of puckering up his face. For goodness sake, gentlemen, cried the tutor, lay Old Goriot off the shelf. Let's have some other sauce with our supper, for we've had him rammed down our throats for the last hour. It's one of the privileges of a good city in Paris that you can be born, live, die there, without anyone paying the least attention to you, so let's take advantage of civilization's blessings. 60 men at least have died today. Do you want us to sit down and cry over every member of the whole hecatombs of Parisian dead? If Goriot has popped off, well, so much the better for him. If you are so fond of him, go and look after him, and let the rest of us eat our meals in peace. Oh, yes, said the widow. It's true enough that it's all the better for him that he's dead. It seemed that the poor soul had a great deal of unpleasantness while he was alive. Such was the sole funeral oration of a being who in Eugene's eyes was fatherhood itself. The boarders began to chat, as they ordinarily did. When Eugene and Biancan had satisfied their hunger, the clatter of forks and spoons, the noisily cheerful conversations, the various unconcerned expressions on those greedy, indifferent faces, everything about them shocked and nauseated them. They left the house to find a priest to watch and pray by the dead man's side that night. It was necessary to dole out the good old man's last rite according to the scanty means at their disposal. Towards 9 o'clock in the evening, the body was placed on a bare sacking of the bedstead in the desolate room. A candle burned on either side, and the priest came to watch there. Before going to bed, Rastignac, who had made some inquiries of the priest about the cost of the funeral, wrote a note to the Baron de Nucingen and to the Comte de Restaud, requesting them to send their representatives to defray the expenses of interment. He sent Christophe with a letter, then went to bed, completely exhausted, and slept. Next morning, Biancan and Rastignac were obliged to go themselves to notify the death, and it was registered about 12 o'clock. 2 o'clock came, and the sons-in-laws had still sent no money, nor had anyone presented himself in their name, and Rastignac had already been obliged to pay the priest. Sylvie asked 10 francs for laying out the old man and sewing him in a shroud, and Eugene and Biancan calculated that they had barely enough to cover the expenses if the dead man's family refused to take any responsibility for them. The medical student, therefore, undertook to lay the body himself in a pauper's coffin brought from his hospital, where he got it at a cheaper rate. Play those rascals a trick, he suggested to Eugene. Buy a grave for 5 years at the Père Lachaise and arrange with the church for the undertaker for a third-class funeral. If the daughters and their husbands refuse to pay up, he can have his legend carved on the tombstone. Here lies Monsieur Goriot, father of the Comtesse de Restaud and the Baron de 𝐎𝐥𝐿, interred at the expense of 2 students. Eugene took part of his friend's advice, but only after he had paid a fruitless call on Monsieur and Madame de 𝐎𝐥𝐿, and then on Monsieur and Madame de Restaud. He got no further than the door in either house. Both porters had received strict orders. Monsieur and Madame are receiving no one, they said. Their father is dead, and they are plunged in the deepest grief. Eugene had experienced enough of Parisian society to know that he must not insist. A strange pang shot through his heart when he saw that it was impossible for him to reach Delphine. "Sell one of your ornaments," he wrote to her in the porter's room, "and let your father be decently laid at last to rest." He sealed the note and begged the porter to give it to Therese for her mistress, but the man handed it to the Baron de 𝐎𝐥𝐿, who threw it in the fire. It was now about 3 o'clock, and Eugene had done all he could return to the boarding house. Tears came to his eyes in spite of himself when he saw the coffin, barely covered by a scanty black cloth, standing on 2 chairs outside the wicket gate in the deserted street. A shabby sprinkler lay on a silver-plated copper bowl of holy water, but no one had stopped to sprinkle the coffin. No attempt had been made even to drape the door with black. The dead man was a pauper, and so there was no display of grief, no friend, no kinsman to follow him to the grave. Biancan, who was obliged to be at the hospital, had left a note for Rastignac to let him know what arrangements he had made for the final services. The medical student's note told Rastignac that a mass was beyond their means, and they would have to be content with the ordinary Vespers service, which cost less, and that he had sent Christophe with a note to the undertakers. As Eugene looked up after reading Biancan's scrawl, he saw Madame Vaucher fingering the little round gold locket that held the hair of Goriot's 2 daughters. "How could you dare take that?" he exclaimed. "Bless me, was it going to be buried along with him?" retorted Sylvie. "It's made of gold." "Of course," answered Eugene indignantly. "Let him at least take the only thing there is to represent his 2 daughters with him to the grave." When the bearers came, Eugene had the coffin taken up to the house again, unscrewed it, and reverently placed on the old man's breast the token that recalled the time when Delphine and Anastasie were young, unspoiled, and innocent, before they had learned to question his authority in anything, as he had remembered in his dying agony. Rastignac and Christophe, with 2 undertaker's men, were the only mourners who followed the funeral to the church of Saint Etienne de Mont, which stands not far from the Rue Neuve Sainte-Geneviève. There the coffin was carried into a low-roofed and dark little chapel. The students looked around it in search of Goriot's 2 daughters or their husbands, but in vain. He was alone, except for Christophe, who had thought he was bound to attend the funeral of a man through whom some handsome tips had come his way. As they waited for the 2 priests, the choir boy, and the beadle, Rastignac grasped Christophe's hand. He could not have uttered a word at that moment. "Yes, Monsieur Eugene," said Christophe. "He was a good, kind man, who never said one word louder than another. He bothered nobody, and never did any harm." The 2 priests, the choir boy, and the beadle came and said and did all one could expect them to for 70 francs, in an age where the church is not rich enough to pray for nothing. The clergy chanted a psalm, the Libera, and the De Profundis. The service lasted 20 minutes. There was only one mourning coach, which was for one of the priests and the choir boy, and they agreed to share it with Eugene and Christophe. "There's no one to follow us," said the priest, "so we may as well go fast. We don't want to spend time on the way. It is 5:30. However, just as the coffin was placed in the hearse, 2 empty carriages, painted with the coats of arms of the Comte de Bristol and the Baron de Nucingen, arrived and followed in the procession to Père Lanchois. At 6 o'clock, Father Goriot's dead body was lowered into his grave in the presence of his daughter's servants. When the short prayer was said, which was the old man's due in return for the student's money, priest and servants went away. The 2 grave diggers flung a few shovelfuls of earth on the coffin and hid it from sight. Then they straightened their backs, and one of them asked Rastignac for their tip. Eugene searched his pocket, but found nothing there. He was obliged to borrow 5 francs from Christophe. The incident, so trivial in itself, overwhelmed Rastignac, and a wave of desperate sadness swept over him. Night was falling, and a damp half-light fretted his nerves. He looked at the grave, and in that place the last tear of his youth was shed. It was a tear that had its source in the sacred emotions of an innocent heart, one of those tears whose radiance springs from the ground where they fall and reaches the gates of heaven. He folded his arms, staring at the clouded sky, and Christophe, seeing his mood, left him. Thus left alone, Rastignac walked a few steps to the highest part of the cemetery, and saw Paris spread out below on both banks of the winding Seine. Lights were beginning to twinkle here and there. His gaze fixed almost avidly upon the space that lay between the column of the Place Vendôme and the dome of the Invalides. There lay the splendid world that he wished to gain. He eyed that humming hive with a look that foretold its despoliation. If he had already felt on his lips the sweetness of its honey, and said with superb defiance, "It's war between us now." And by the way of throwing down the gauntlet to society, Rastignac went to dine with Madame de Nucingen.